Hi everybody, my name is Bookie and I'm here for the Good Eve channel. And today I'm going to be talking with you about the 7 differences between being rich versus being wealthy. Now, this is a controversial topic because people often use them interchangeably, and I must confess, so do I. But for this video, I'd like us to delve into the nuance between the two, and so we can see and have a better understanding about, being rich, or rich versus fake rich, and be a really wealthy versus rich. But I'll just, for ease of no confusion, let's just do rich versus wealthy. So welcome to the Good Eve channel. And I want to ask, before I delve straight into the video, that you give us a like, hit that like button, the thumbs up button, and then you also subscribe. And please, I'm giving you 7, so send 7 people my way. Share this video to 7 people. I'll really appreciate it, and I'd love you forever. Mwah, mwah, mwah. All right, so now we're gonna get started. What does it mean to be rich? This primarily speaks to inflow and income. A rich person has a lot of money coming in. A rich person might also have a lot of debt and tends to spend a lot in order to appear rich. What does it mean to be wealthy? A definition of wealth starts from a person's net worth. A wealthy person has a positive net worth, and typically their net worth is several multiples of their annual expenses. Wealthy people lay great emphasis on income generating assets and investments like real estate, mutual funds, shares, and stocks. They avoid extremely lavish displays of wealth relative to their own net worth. So, a wealthy person can be hard to identify, as they may likely live in a modest area and drive a very modest car. So these two definitions contrast what it means to be wealthy and what it means to be rich. But the better way I can explain it is by diving into the 7 differences between how the rich approach things and how the wealthy approach things. So the first comparison between rich and wealthy is how they earn their income. So a rich person is usually a high earner. They earn a lot of money. So for instance, they may have $1 million coming in every month. A wealthy person may have moderate, low, or also be a high earner. So it's possible to be wealthy and what you earn in a month is just $3,000 or $5,000 a month. Yes, it's possible if you've accumulated your wealth over time. So this is one of the big differences between a rich person. A rich person needs to have a lot of cash flow coming in to present the next point, and next different, their spend. Rich people tend to be focused on spending money on outward displays of wealth, while a wealthy person is focused on building. So they're not interested in displays of wealth or appearing to be rich, even though they may be rich. What they're focused on is building their assets, building their nest eggs, building their portfolio. And so they invest in quality or assets. So even if they do have to buy something that may not have much of residual value, they'll buy something that's quality that will not require them to keep repurchasing and repurchasing again. For instance, the case is like, we can take an example of a car. A rich person will probably buy a Lamborghini, something really flashy, loud, that lets you know when they drive in, someone has arrived. A wealthy person may buy a Mercedes-Benz or may buy a BMW, will buy a good quality car for the safety, values, for the longevity of the car, because it gets good support and service. They may buy the car used, maybe 3 years used, so it still has the body and looks like it was bought brand new. And because they buy quality, they'll keep that car for 10 years, 15 years. They'll maintain it well and keep it for several years. Whereas a rich person may just release the Lamborghini. After 2 years, it's gone, they've changed, on to the next. Maybe even 6 months later, depending So that's one of the other differences between rich and wealthy. Difference number 3. A rich person tends to carry debt, and they're usually not in a position to save either much, or basically they generally don't save. It's money in, money out. So because sometimes it's not even enough that they spend the high income they're earning, because they know this money is coming in, they borrow ahead of time, knowing that, look, money's coming in, I'll just pay it off when it comes. So they're usually on this rotating debt, escalating debt roller coaster, and they need it on an ongoing basis to maintain this image, this lifestyle, this perception of what they believe a rich person should and live like. A wealthy person doesn't move from debt. They move from savings and investments and assets. So saving, investing is a top priority for someone who's wealthy. For them, growing the gap is crucial. And by the gap, I mean the gap between what they spend and what they earn. So they really are focused on growing their investments and growing their portfolio and growing their assets. It's their top priority. So they run away from personal debt for frivolous items. Number 4, a rich person would buy liabilities and short-term near cash assets. So a lot of times with someone who's rich, if they do have any surplus cash, if they're going to buy something, it'll be something very near cash, so that if they need to spend, it doesn't take time for them to liquidate it. They also buy a lot of liabilities, and like cars, like houses that are unsellable at the same price at which they purchased them, like upgrades, millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in home upgrades in an area where when it's time to sell, those upgrades are only relevant to the homeowner. They won't be passed on or add any value to the sale of the home. So they tend to find them spending a lot on liabilities, things that cost them money, country club memberships, excessive country club memberships, things like that. And I'm not talking about business club memberships, because those can be very lucrative in terms of networking and building and eventually earning income through them indirectly and directly. But I'm talking about just the social clubs to be among. The rich are very particular about spending money, displaying their status. Wealthy buy assets, long-term assets. So they're willing to take long-term positions. They're willing to take 10-year, 20-year, 15-year, 30-year positions, because they've come to understand that when you see when you invest in assets, they can sustain you and be of benefit to you, in perpetuity, so forever, potentially. So that tends to be their focus. They're not so focused on, I need to get a private jet right now. If they can have access, if they do need to travel private, they'll probably, key into a service that allows them to charter a jet for those important times. And then, they'll fly commercial every other time or drive. They tend to be really focused on not wanting to have their money tied down to liabilities. They're focused on assets. So that's another difference between the wealthy and the rich. 5th difference, the time spent earning. So a lot of when rich individuals, you find, have to work hard to keep earning. If they're not working, they're not earning. So a lot of their time is actively earning this income that they use to display their lifestyle. Whereas for a wealthy person, it goes beyond just earning. So they usually very quickly or with time get to the point where they have accumulated assets that work for them, because remember, their focus is buying assets that can generate income. So they have multiple streams of income. If you own 5 properties, it's not one stream, it's 5 streams that all of them are real estate. It's still 5 different sources of income that are coming into your position. And so you often find with wealthy people, they get to a stage where they're not spending so much time actively earning their income. They've gotten to a point where a lot of residual income is also coming in. And so their actively earned income will increasingly become a smaller part of their total net worth. Difference number 6. For a rich person, we're not going to talk about the ratio of expenses relative to their income. For a rich person, oftentimes their expenses, ongoing expenses, will exceed their income, or at the very least match it. So that's another trait. They spend, no matter how much they're making $10 million, they're making $20 million, they spend it all and then some. Whereas with a wealthy person, they have a relatively low expense ratio to their income. So they do have expenses, they do spend, but when you compare it to how much they bring in and how much they earn, it is a mere compared to their inflow. So that's another difference between wealthy and rich. Wealthy people are really mindful about keeping the ratio of their expenses to income low. And I'll explain this in a practical example. Let's take Warren Buffett, for instance. Warren Buffett can afford to have a private jet because relative to his income, a private jet for him is probably like me owning a car. Whereas you'll have people who own private jets that do not own or earn a fraction of what Warren earns, and they really can't afford those jets. But they want the status of being, oh, I have a jet. And so they put themselves under pressure, they take up debt, they take up the responsibility to maintain these jets, and these jets ultimately will bankrupt them. So that's an example of, I'm not going to sit here and say you shouldn't drive a Bentley, you shouldn't drive a Rolls Royce. No, you can drive these cars if you love cars and it's something that you care about. But how much of your net worth, how much of your monthly income is it relative to what you're earning? If it's more than a certain percentage, then you really need to be thinking about, I'm not ready for this yet. I'm not at that level of wealth. I'm not at that level of income, inflow that I can afford this. So I think that's where the balancing act comes in. You can have someone who's just driving a Toyota Prado, for instance, nothing anywhere near a private jet, the Warren example, but you're behaving like a rich person if the car you really can afford is a Toyota Corolla, but you take everything you can, you borrow from all and sundry, and I must drive this Prado, they must know I've arrived, but you can't afford to fuel it, you can't afford to maintain it. God forbid you can't afford to cover the insurance on it. Then you're living like a rich person because you're living, or fake rich person because you're living above your means. You can't afford it. So that's the mindset of the person who drives the Corolla and has that, that income gap. They've grown the gap. That person is on their way to being wealthy because they'll eventually drive a Prado if they want, but they know they won't drive it before they've grown the gap to be able to afford the Prado. So this is another difference between rich and wealthy. And the final difference I wanted to share today between the rich and wealthy is a rich person typically depends on a high salary or high income with typically no real long investment plan. You often hear them say, oh, they believe that rainy day will never come. They wish they could prepare for it. But, they have so many expenses now. They can't just do that now. That's always an excuse. And the energy is like, look, I have just so many obligations right now. I can't possibly make an adjustment to my lifestyle to make room for long-term investments, which requires usually savings, right? Whereas with a wealthy person, they will focus and prioritize, sacrifice, creating multiple streams of income, investing, taking long-term positions, just in order to ensure that they can grow the gap and grow their wealth. So I hope with these 7 examples, you've been able to kind of get a feel for the difference between a rich person and a wealthy person. And like I always say, please remain humble and let's learn. Thank you. Bye for now.